Hello everybody, Jazza here. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for your response to the kind of videos that I've been making recently with these black backgrounds and with all of the GIFs flying around and all of them. Because it's risky to change your format on YouTube. And I've loved the kind of discussions that we've had, even though the videos themselves haven't had an awful lot of hits. But I'm really relishing in making stuff that I'm proud of at the moment. So thank you for your support and for sharing it and for taking part in the discussion in an intelligent way. And in order to continue that discussion, I wanted to comment on some of the comments that you have made on my Human Rights Act video and on my Legal Highs video, because you had some really interesting things to say. So, shall we go? I should also say before we start, if you haven't seen either of these videos, probably go and watch them first, because otherwise this won't make an awful lot of sense. Just FYI. On my Human Rights Act video, Dan Gamble made some really interesting points and linked to an article by Liberty, who are actively opposing the repealing of the Human Rights Act, and talks about the fact that what they are proposing, what the Conservative government is proposing in terms of the British Bill of Rights, is that they are kind of tinkering with stuff around the edges. I will leave a link to the Liberty article that he talked about down below, because it's like a really interesting read, and if you're like law kind of like psyche is being sparked by this whole discussion, then like have a go, have a plough through, give it a look, give it a gander. Lackland said, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, he asked, does the current Human Rights Act force British judges to take all of the European Court's decisions and use them as a precedent in its own decision? Is that what the Conservatives are complaining about? I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. There's also kind of the fact that the UK, apart from countries like Azerbaijan and Russia and those kinds of like the usual suspects, the UK has kind of like isn't one of the best countries in Europe in terms of being told off by the European Court of Human Rights. And so there's also kind of that humiliation kind of being like having your wrists slapped. And I think that actually the biggest problem is the idea of sovereignty. It's the kind of like the overarching ideal of British judges should be taking into account British laws that were put forward by British members of Parliament. And you can kind of understand that, although like my position, I think I made really clear in the video, I'm kind of on the side of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So let's not fix it and risk losing our access to like what has fundamentally been a really, really important court in the UK. Jordan made some really interesting points about the whole idea of like human rights and the fact that it's very much a Western concept that came out of the tail end of World War II, specifically after the Holocaust, right? And it was along the lines of, it kind of came out of war kind of agreements and what should be used in war, and the fact that every human being should be able to have like a name and a number, and then there's also the fact that human rights are kind of being extended at the moment to, and some people see that as quite ridiculous. For example, it was suggested a couple of years ago that internet access be included as a human right, and obviously in terms of like priorities, internet access is probably not number one. Right to have a name is probably quite high up there, and suggested that we call them civil rights or perhaps social rights, because it kind of implies like more kind of context into terms of the world that you're living in terms of the country that you're living in. And I think that was a really important point to make, Jordan, so thank you. Now over to my Legal Highs video, where a lot of you brought up Portugal as an example, and obviously Portugal is the first country to completely decriminalise the use of all drugs. So basically what they did about 12 years ago now, they said that the drugs are still illegal, but the having a 10-day supply of each of those drugs is still legal, so that addicts, people who are addicted to these drugs, are treated as people who are sick rather than people who are criminals. So this has meant that like HIV levels has dropped because people will say, I'm an addict, I need clean needles. So Portugal is clearly a really, really interesting case, because it's clearly done a lot of good in terms of reducing the number of addicts, reducing the amount of money that is spent on each individual addict, and also I think that this is just generally the way forward in terms of dealing with the war on drugs. What I will say though is that I actually think I prefer the method that was put forward by the New Zealand government that eventually never ended up going through, because if you end up using synthetic drugs that can be made anywhere in a lab, that kind of takes away and pulls the rug out from under all of the drug cartels and the drug producers in developing countries such as Afghanistan and South America, that are those that suffer greatest from people in Kensington buying like a bag of cocaine for a Saturday night. So I think that the production of safe synthetic kind of substitutes for main drugs is probably the better way forward. But Portugal is clearly a really interesting example, and thank you for all of you for talking about that. Paul mentioned this really awesome TED Talk, because TED Talks are amazing, right? From Johan Hari, who is a British journalist, and I will also link that TED Talk down below, because Johan talks really interestingly about our ideas of addiction and the fact that most people don't become addicts if they have like a generally healthy lifestyle. So yeah, check that out, and thank you very much, Paul, for leaving that down below. Something that I should also mention, a couple of people called me up on this, were my comments about the use of animals in drug testing. In terms of like generally, for stuff like cosmetics and food products, I don't think that there is an ethical case for the use of animals in those kinds of areas of testing. So where I think that that is different is when there is a kind of like overarching good to what is happening. So if there is a chance for us to be able to stop a huge global problem like the war on drugs, or at least make a dent in it, I believe that selective animal testing for those specific causes can be useful and shouldn't be a barrier to us being able to kind of find new solutions and those kinds of things. And I think that obviously a lot of commercial animal testing is quite bad and far too prolific. What we need to be aware of is that it's done responsibly and it's limited and it is only used in appropriate circumstances. The creation of synthetic drugs so that we no longer have to rely on drug cartels in developing worlds, I think, is a justification enough to use animal testing in that particular sense. I know that a lot of people feel very strongly about this. I thank you for listening to my opinion. I will listen to yours. We will probably not agree, but that is the nature of debate, right? Again, thank you so much for your support in these new videos. I really want to do these like loads, more and more, please. If you like hearing me talk about these kinds of like more like gritty issues, then check out my podcast, which I do with my friend Jimmy. Every week we talk about UK and global politics and social issues. It's amazing. This week we talk about Oh My Vlog and Donald Trump. So it was fun. We had fun. Something I also wanted to do is I've toyed with the idea of doing a Q&A video. Just a general Q&A, because I don't think I've interacted with you guys like that in a very long time. If you have any questions, literally any, be they private, or how I make stuff, or how I research, or what my favourite sandwich is. If anyone asks what my favourite sandwich is, then I'm not answering it. Then leave them down below in the comments, and I will put together a Q&A video. Because let's get to know each other a little bit better, because I think I'm in this for a long haul now. Yay. Okay, I have been Rhyming with Oranges. Toodly. Hello YouTube, Jazza here. Look, I'm all like well lit and stuff, isn't this fancy? So our newly elected Conservative government have decided that all drugs are bad, and thus are trying to ban everything that makes your brain do stuff that it wouldn't otherwise do.